If you're just about to go on a track day, what do you need to do to prepare your car? I'm just about to take my 2013 Audi S4 on track at Donington, so I need to get my car ready, and I thought I'd bring you guys along for the ride too. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing I want to cover is your engine. That is one of the key components that you're probably going to be stressing harder than it's ever been stressed in its life. The first thing that I would highly recommend you check is your oil level and its condition. If you've relatively recently done an oil change in the last 3-6 months or so, you're probably fine, but you will still want to check the level with your dipstick, or in my case you might need to use your infotainment screen to do that, but I do have a spare dipstick, so to check your level you just drop it in and make sure that it's at least between the minimum and maximum lines. While using the dipstick, you can also use it to check the health of the oil. If it's pitch black, then it's probably in need of replacing, but if it's a nice golden or maybe slightly darker brown, then you're probably fine. Since you'll be stressing your engine pretty heavily, you'll also want to make sure that you can keep it cool. That includes making sure that you have enough coolant and that the coolant is also, much like the oil, in good health and good colour. In my case, the sort of pink-purple is fine, and I clearly have between the minimum and maximum lines, so I'm all good there, although I will be bringing some spare water and coolant to make sure, just in case I end up using some or boiling some off during the track day. And lastly, for your engine is, especially if it has spark plugs, if it's nearing, or those are nearing their expected service life, they're due to be replaced sometime soon, and especially if you're having any level of misfires while you're driving on the road, you definitely want to think about changing those out, or at very least addressing that problem, which could include switching out your plugs or coils, whatever setup you have, or even your wires if you've got that set up instead, so that you don't have misfires and effectively non-combustion while you're on the track. One last note for the drivetrain, I would mention that if you have an automatic transmission, especially a DSG like this one, it's a good idea to make sure that it's been serviced relatively recently, or at least that you've been keeping up with the service schedule. I just did the full DSG service on my gearbox. I did a full video on it if you want to check that out, but I can rest easy knowing that it's got fresh fluid, filter, and I've scraped out all of the sludge from the bottom of the sump pan, so it's in good health. Especially for those automatic transmissions, having that sort of fluid and filter change can be a very good thing to extend the lifespan, especially if you're tracking your car. So that's the drivetrain, but what about the bit that puts the power to the ground, the wheels? Well, you will want to check quite a lot in your wheel wells. Specifically your tyres, you will want to make sure that you have enough tread on them to have a good amount of grip on track. You can do that by running your finger through the bands and checking how much meat there is between the top tyre surface and the ridges or the bumps that are built into the tyre. And you also want to check your alignment, which you can do if you have been driving on your current set of tyres for a little while. What you do is check the tread depth across the full width of the tyre, making sure that it's nice and even across the width. If you have uneven wear, say the inside is has a lot less tread depth than the outside, then you might want to consider getting an alignment before you hit the track to make sure that you have a nice stable platform. Plus, if you do an alignment at an actual professional garage, then they can also check things like the toe angle, which is how tilted in your wheels are, which can help with stability, especially during corners. You'll also want to check your tyre pressure, which should be the rated pressure for your car, although you probably want to bring a gauge and a way to inflate and deflate them on the track day so that you can balance out your tyres. As the temperatures rise, the pressures also do, so you can balance that out. One of the other components that you will stress way beyond their standard limits are your brakes. Those get incredibly hot, especially on a track day, and if you're just running the stock pads and discs, then you might run into the problem of them fading very quickly and potentially losing braking performance, which can obviously be dangerous. In my case, I am fitting EBC yellow stuff pads, which are performance-oriented pads that are still approved for road use, but have much better heat carrying capabilities, and so can deal with much higher heat while still maintaining good braking strength and obviously not burning up or fading too quickly. Now, to fit those pads, it's relatively simple, at least for the front axle. What you do is jack your car up on that corner, you can take your wheel off, and it's a good idea to check the full surface area of the tire for cracking or punctures to make sure you're not going to have a blowout while you're driving. And then you can take the 2 bolts that hold the caliper on off. They're 13mm in my case. Take those off, and then you can take the caliper off. You might want to compress the piston back a bit so that they come off nice and easily. And then you can fit your new pads into the caliper, place your caliper back down, making sure that the slide pins are out the way, put the 2 bolts back in with some fresh Loctite to make sure they don't fall out on track. And that is your brakes, your front brakes anyway, installed. Now, unfortunately, in my case, my rear pads didn't fit. The actual pad size themselves was fine, it was the thickness that was the problem. My calipers wouldn't allow me to put those 2 new pads in with their full thickness, and so for the sake of balancing the brake pads, I ended up doing something that I wouldn't recommend, which is essentially angle grinding a bit of the pad off so that they fit in nicely, and did that on both rear sides. So I do have less pad life than I would like, but I now do have a set of spare pads in the boot that I know will fit and that I can swap to if there are any troubles with my altered pads. Also, while you're in the wheel well, and especially if you have your wheel off, it's a good idea to check your suspension components, like your bushings for tears, your control arms for rust. Make sure that your springs are in good condition and seated nicely, and that your shock absorbers aren't leaking. Then you can put your wheel back on, and if you do no other track prep before you get on track, please, the one thing that I recommend is make sure that your wheel bolts are torqued to spec, or wheel nuts if that's what you have instead. That will not only save you from losing a wheel, but it'll also save you from warping your brake rotor under high heat, which you will be getting to on track. That is a very easy thing to do. You grab a torque wrench, which are not expensive. I got one for like £30 on Amazon and it works good enough. In my case, mine get torqued around 120 Newton meters, so I torqued every single bolt on the car, and I'll be torquing them again before I get out on track. And the final bit of advice is to remove any sort of unnecessary and loose items like spare water bottles. I've got flashlight in the boot, that sort of thing, so that they don't fly around and damage your interior or hit you in the back of the neck under heavy braking. You definitely don't want that to be happening, plus it's extra weight you're lugging around, and less weight means more fast, so more better, right? So those are my tips and the guide for prepping your car for a track day. If you have any questions, do feel free to leave those in the comments down below, and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the video on me tracking my S4 for the first time. Also, check out plenty of other videos on the channel. There are plenty of DIY guides. There's also some car reviews, including the one on my S4 if you want to check that out. And that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoy it. If you are going on a track day, definitely enjoy that, and we'll see you all next week.